Hey, this is Pastor Jeff, and it's hard to believe, but I'm real excited that this is our last taped time where we're going to not be live, and I just I miss you guys so much. I'm so looking forward to us to all get back in the same room, and uh, and 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 I do realize, that things are going to look and be a little bit different, but I'm just so glad for us to all get back together. So and for me to get back to talking to real people, all right. And so anyway, hey, let me kind of catch you up and be a few nuts and bolts here, things you need to know. We'll try to get some of this stuff out to you, and so just be watching your email from the church just to make sure that you keep up with it. But here's the plan right now. Next Saturday and Sunday, we are going to have services, and they're all going to be the same service. So you don't necessarily have to come to the service you normally come to. You can pick any of the three: the Saturday night, the two on Sunday morning, and it's going to be the same music at all three. In fact, we're kind of encouraging everybody to go to, and then that way for a while we can take all the tarps up. We can spread out, and I think we can handle and still maintain the social distancing that they're asking. And so I think we're going to be good this week, and then the next week after that, that week we're not going to do any small groups. It's only going to be services, okay? And then that gives us an extra week so that when we come back, we'll do the three services, and they will have their distinctiveness. For you Saturday night folks, I'll tell you this coming Saturday. But we've got some special things for you with David and Susie back in town, and we'll be telling you about those. But we'll tell you live at your service. But anyway, so again, we're trying to kind of kick things back up, kind of one thing at a time per week, right? And so your groups, your small groups, will meet the next week. And here's my heartbeat, just so you understand. I do realize that there are some of you that you're still going to be watching at home. And my heartbeat for people is that there's one thing that we've learned from this quarantine and isolation is that we need each other. And God made us for that reason. And so if you're unable for a while, or maybe you're still a little bit, you fall into that group that doesn't need to come just yet, then we want to, we're coming up with ways to get and to keep you connected in your small group, or get you into a small group. Now, we're working on ways right now for you to be a part. If you're already part of your small group, then we're working on ways to get a computer in there, or perhaps somehow get you so you're able to Zoom into your small group. And we're working on that, and your leaders will be getting in touch with be watching the email for that. Now, if you're not part of a small group, okay, you're the ones that I want to talk to, because we're gonna, in the short term, and it may turn into the long term. You never know how it works, but we're gonna start putting together groups that'll help you get connected, and basically they'll be online groups, kind of like what we've been doing. But so if you're not going to be able to come back for a few weeks, or perhaps even a couple of months, I don't know what your situation is, then and you're not part of a small group, then I want you to email me, Pastor Jeff, all one word, at indianrocks.org, right? And I have people that monitor that account. If you have needs, that's the one that you email to. But we're wanting to put people in just so you can be a part and be connected. I just have a heartbeat for some who are not going to make it back. We've noticed from our surveys that a good 70% of you are saying, okay, we're coming back first Sunday. But then there's another good percentage of you that are going to wait a few weeks, perhaps a couple of months, or even a few months. And I don't want you to feel disconnected. So if you'll just email me, and then somebody will get in touch with you, and then we'll figure out how to do to some groups so you can feel connected. Now, if you already have your small group that you're part of, then go ahead and see about what they're going to do to help you get involved. But main thing is that next week when you start watching the services, right, they'll be live like what we normally do, and you'll see kind of things added back every week. We're not going to try to do everything at once. We're going to add a few things back every week, as you know, like especially in our worship and music. It's going to take time to get people back, get them rehearsed, get them all back in here and get everything going. So we're going to add new things every week, and you're going to see some really neat things. We've had some time to really to dream and scheme, and so some different ideas, new ideas. So looking forward to our summer time. So anyway, I just wanted to let you know that. Be watching your email for like a video mail that I might do to give you updates on different things and to keep you updated. And I'll try to keep them short so that you can go straight to them and take a look at them. But the greatest thing, the absolute greatest thing, is that we're all going to get together, and whether you're going watching still online or we're going to all be in here, and I am real excited about that. I'm real excited about that. So anyway, all right. Well, today is the last message that we're doing in our parables. I've just kind of entitled it "Stories That Jesus Told," and Jesus told stories to prove a point, to teach a lesson. In fact, it says over in Matthew chapter 13 that Jesus said that within the parables are secrets to the kingdom, and so these secrets to the kingdom are things that he wants you to know and learn, but they're not on the surface. You have to look below the surface to see. So you have this story, and the story means one thing, but obviously the meaning of it reflects on something else. And so this last one that I'm going to share with you is I call it the two debtors. All right, the two debtors, and it's similar to the king that we talked about a few weeks ago in forgiveness. But it has a different look at it. So there's something in here that Jesus wants you to understand about what it means to be his follower. And he's talking to those people that are his. It's an interesting, and I make that distinction. I think I did a little video a few weeks ago that shared it, is the reason I do that, those that are his. Because so many times the name Christian encompasses so much. And with the whole political climate and everything else, people don't even know what we're talking about when we say that word. But if you're a believer, if you're his, all right, there's been a time in your life you put your faith and trust in him. This particular parable is meant for you. Doesn't mean if you're not his or not a believer today that you can't learn from it. But this one was meant to teach us something. About what it means to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and what those things look like. So I'm going to jump right into it, and basically take a look in Luke chapter 7. All right, Luke chapter 7, and we'll begin in verse 36. But the one thing that's really incredible about this parable is that it is told because of a real life situation. All right, and you'll see it in just a minute. So number one is what I'm going to call the context. So let's set up the reason that Jesus told this story. And the reason that he told this story was for a particular purpose. And it's because of a person he went to have a meal with. And again, you'll pick up on it. I'll try to give you the context, the local custom / context of the time, because it'll help you see it a little bit better. All right, let's take a look. So at the context, Luke chapter 7 and verse 36. Right? It says, one of the Pharisees asked him, that is Jesus, to eat with him. And he went into the Pharisee's house and he reclined at the table. Okay? So this guy's name was Simon, and he was a Pharisee. And you have to remember the Pharisees were highly religious. We've talked about that. And their spiritual lives were very important to them. But but did they truly understand what the gospel was? Many of them didn't. But in this particular case, I think this guy did. You'll see what I mean in just a minute. They were reclining at the table. So again, I don't know if this has a huge part of it, but I don't know about you, but I've got an imagination, and so I love to picture things in my mind. So when you think about a table, don't think of the West like us. Think of a table that sits about this high off the ground, and then they would have pillows scattered around, right? And they recline at the table. So what that means is that you're laying down, usually, with your hand on your head, right? And you're eating kind of reclined or laying down. Sounds like a great idea to me, right? It's like eating in your recliner at home, right? So that's your setting, okay? It kind of helps you. It's definitely a Middle Eastern setting. And so Jesus is eating at this guy's house, and they're reclined at the table. Okay, good. And behold, a woman of the city who was a sinner, when she learned that he was reclining at the table in the Pharisee's house, she brought an alabaster flask of ointment. And standing behind him at his feet, weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears, and she wiped him with the hair of her head and kissed his feet and anointed them with the ointment. And now when the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, if this man were a prophet, he would have known who and what sort of woman this is who is touching him, for she is a sinner. Okay, now, it may seem strange about just somebody walking in, but you have to remember that the houses of their time, all the windows, all the doors were remained open because of the heat and their circulation. So she just comes in, right? And she begins to wash Jesus' feet. Now, the thing that seems really weird to you, and it does to me, but it was real customary at the time for an honored guest or somebody that you really wanted to impress or whatever when they came to your home, is that you wash their feet, because you have to remember this area of the world is we call it sand, but in reality it's dust. I don't know if you've ever been to these areas, but it's what they call sand is like talc powder. It's real fine, and they wore sandals, and so they're wherever you went, your feet were going to get dusty, dirty, right? And so usually when you went into someone's home, they washed your feet, and so. But you can find out in a minute this guy didn't do this for Jesus. And so this woman came in and she did these things. And so it was you did these things for those that you wanted to honor, right? That you offered respect to. These are things that have almost become foreign in our culture. Honoring people, and respecting people. It's an incredible thing. But at this time, honor and respect held high places. And who you honor and respected, right, told a whole lot about who you are, right? And so this sinful woman came in. Now, we're not told, right? We're not told what her sin was, but more than likely with this alabaster ointment, right, which was expensive type perfume, right? More than likely it was some sort of prostitution, some sort of sexual sinfulness. We're not told, but that's kind of what it looks like. And so she comes in and again honoring Jesus, right, by washing his feet and then ointment, right? And so through all of this, even though it may seem strange custom to you, the thing we need to learn from it is that the Pharisee immediately thought to himself, because anybody who is very religious, or anybody who, quote, does things in their own strength and power, they almost all have a judgmental nature of other people. And so he immediately thought to himself, and it's interesting. It's like, you got to remember, when you're with Jesus, you can't even think something without him knowing about it. And so he thought to himself, wow, if this Jesus really was so great, if he really was this great prophet, then he'd know that the woman that's touching him is a sinful person, and he wouldn't allow her to even touch him, which is not the case. Why? Because Christ didn't come into the world to judge the world. He came into the world to make a difference in people's lives. And guys, when you and I are judgmental and critical of other people, we just need to remember this story, because God has called us to love people in spite of maybe their shortcomings, in spite of their own sinfulness. And Jesus tells us why. Again, this is one of those great and powerful parables that Jesus tells that is based on this little story. Okay? All right, let's continue with that one. Take a look down now, if you will. And Jesus answering said to him, right? Jesus answering. This guy had just said to himself, that is, thought it. And so Jesus answered his thought. All right, is basically what it's saying here. All right, here we go. Simon, I have something to say to you. And he answered, say it, teacher. The word teacher there is the word for rabbi, which was a term of respect, right? And honor. And you'll see here just in a minute. Okay, continue. And here's the parable, okay? So that you understand the story, number two is going to be the parable. Number one's the context. So what is the context? Context is Jesus is eating over at this guy's house, and they're probably just talking and whatever, and this sinful woman comes in, probably a prostitute. She comes in and she washes Jesus' feet, which was customary at the time, which you're going to find in a minute that Simon didn't even offer this courtesy. So kind of Simon kind of saw himself as equals with this guy, as opposed to this woman saw Jesus as her savior. You'll see in just a minute. So it's just anyway. So you have you have the context, and then you have a story that is based on what just happened. Because this Pharisee thought, well, if Jesus really was who he says he is, and if he was some kind of big deal prophet, he would know that the woman touching him, that. So this is the story that Jesus tells. All right, let's take a look at it. In verse 41 and 42. Okay, a certain moneylender had two debtors. Therefore, a guy who was lending money, he had two people who owed him money. Okay, let's continue. One owed him 500 denarii, and the other owed him 50. And when they could not pay, he canceled the debt of both. Now here's the question, now which of them will love him more? All right, let's talk about it just for a second. First of all, you got this money lender. That is a person to whom a debt is owed. The representation here is God, right? God the Father. All right, sin is a debt, right, that has to be paid. And so that's the context that's being talked about. Number two is the two debts. The two debts. One is 50 denarii, and the other is 500. Now, I've already shared with you before, but just to remind you, the word denarii was a day's wages. One denarii, or denarius, right? One was usually given to a common laborer for one day's work. So you're looking at 50 denarii. You're looking at a couple of months. Okay, a couple of months' wages. Nothing. I mean, it's not. Okay, can I say it this way? It's not nothing. Right? It's enough. Right? But then the other one had a huge debt, 500 denarii. You're looking at, not quite 2 years, but almost 2 years worth of wages. So you're looking at a sizable. Now, this moneylender decides to forgive them both. Okay? And I don't know what it is about it, but we have this tendency. Our whole world does. But as a believer, you and I shouldn't be this way. We have this tendency to compare ourselves with others and somehow think that, okay, yeah, well, we need Jesus, but we don't need him near as bad as a lot of people need him. And in reality, the debt, either debt, 50 or 500 would put you in prison, right? Because neither one of them could pay it. Both of them had debts that they could not repay. So at the time, both of them could go to prison. So Doesn't matter how big one is or how small one is. It is what it is, right? It doesn't matter if you're a big sinner or what some people would call a small sinner. It's still a debt, and it's still punishable by prison, right? So that's a powerful thing to see. So you have this money lender, represents God. You have the two debts, that represents our sin, different amounts. Number 3, you have the inability of either one of them to repay the debt, right? And then number 4, you have the canceling of both debts. That's forgiveness. That's paying the debt. Therefore, Christ died on the cross so that the debt might be paid for. But here's the interesting part about it. And here's the reason that Jesus told the parable. And here's the question. And I already jumped ahead and read it a little bit, but you can take a look at verse 2. It says this: which of them will love him more? So then the picture here is forgiveness, yes, our sin, God's forgiveness, yes, all of those things. But the real thought here is love, loving God, right? Greatest commandment in the scripture, Jesus himself said, love the Lord your God with all heart, soul, mind, and strength, all right? So loving God is the thought here, right? And here's some things that will help us, right? Which do you think loved more? And let's read that. Let's read that, what it says. Simon answered, all right? Let's get to 41 and go to 42. Certain money-lender had 2 debtors. One owed 500 denarii, the other 50. And when they could not pay, he canceled the debt of them both. Now here's the question. Now which of them will love him more? And Simon answered, the one, I suppose, for whom he canceled the larger debt. And he said to him, you have judged rightly. Right? Now, one of the greatest gifts that you can be given is for you to see your own sinfulness. It's a painful gift, but it is a powerful gift. And it's incredible in our culture, especially. It's not this way all around the world, but our culture for sure. It's incredible in our culture how that you and I don't seem to see just that there's even sinfulness anymore, much less, except for the really, really bad people, right? Which is why this parable was written. And the great issue is that how much you love God will depend on how much you are able to see just what he did for you when he sent Christ into the world, the gospel, who Christ is, what he came to do. When you understand that your debt has been forgiven and that prison was your destiny, but because of forgiving of a debt, freedom instead of prison became your destiny. And it doesn't matter if you see yourself as a 50 denarii sinner or a 500 one. But whenever we start to have pride, that we're better than most, and we look around and see that, we're just a 50, we're not a 500, or some of you that see yourself as a 500. The reason it's easier for the 500 person is because they know where they would be, right? And they know that there was that was a huge debt, but in reality, the debt is immaterial when the result is the same, prison. But Jesus, this is a genius story to teach you and I the messages of grace, the messages of forgiveness, and then the resulting gratitude and love we have for God because we have a clear picture of what he's done in our lives. It's a genius story. And so you have this religious guy who, okay, I need forgiveness, but I don't need near as much as this terrible woman, right? So you have this great picture. And let me just tell you this, if you're a believer today, if you're his, guys, you and I have no right to stand in condemnation and judgment of this lost world around us. Why? Because you and I are sinners like they are. We just happen to be on this side of it to where we've understood this grace that God's given us. Man, it's a powerful, powerful, powerful message, right? So then the question, who loves more? Number 4 is what I'm going to call the application. Let's see how Jesus puts this. So when you put all this together, you have a context, and then you have a story or a parable, and then you have a question that Jesus asks to prove a point, and then how does this apply to our lives? Let's take a look at it. In verse 44. Then turning toward the woman, he said to Simon, all right, so you get the picture, context, right? He's reclined at a table, he's talking with Simon, right? And he turns, again, you can see it, and he turns toward the woman, but he's still talking to Simon. So he's got an object lesson for Simon to learn about Simon's own hypocrisy, right? This is pretty powerful stuff. So he turns to the woman, but he talks still to Simon. All right, here we go. Do you see this woman? All right, you see her, okay? I entered your house, and you gave me no water for my feet, but she has wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. In other words, Simon, you don't understand. First of all, I don't think Simon truly understood who Jesus was. Listen to me, guys. Who you honor and who you respect says a whole lot about who you are. And if he truly knew who Jesus was, this would be a lot different. If he was truly honoring and respecting, I don't know. It's an interesting thing. I think if you'll catch on what Jesus is trying to say here. Let's continue. It goes on to say wash my feet, but she's done with her. You gave me no kiss, all right? From the time I came in, she has not ceased from kissing my feet. Now, that might seem pretty. Again, cultural has got you what you have to understand. Is back at this time, all right? It was like a shaking of a hand. It was a greeting, a kiss, right? And so what Jesus is trying to say, you didn't even shake my hand, and yet this woman is if you will, shake my feet. So it's kiss since it's the greeting. So he's saying, this woman gets it. She sees who she is. She sees who I am. She sees what I can do in her life, and perhaps even what he's about to do in her life. And she is overwhelmed with him and his presence. Pretty neat. All right, let's continue. You did not anoint my head with oil, but she has anointed my feet with ointment. So again, it was another customary thing. There was oil there. It's just the way at their time, because it was such a dry, arid place, skin cracked, that kind of thing. Right? And therefore, I tell you, her sins, which are many, are forgiven. So, forgiven, that means the debt's been paid for, which shows you not only who Christ is, but what he came to do. And it also shows that it's a gift when you can really see just how much you need who Christ is, when you can see yourself in the mirror. James, the book of James has several things to say about it, is that it's a gift to be able to get a look and see yourself as you really are, because then it will drive you to who Christ really is, if you really see it, right? Right? Let's continue. Therefore, I tell you, her sins, which are many, are forgiven, for she loved much. But he who is forgiven little loves little. And he said to her, your sins are forgiven. You see, that's why she had come. So obviously she knew who Jesus was. And obviously she knew what Christ had come to do. And so that's what she came for. And then obviously, by grace through faith, Jesus forgave her, right? But Simon can't see himself. He can't see himself as just as desperate as the woman is. Why? Because his debt is not as large. Yet the same debt could send them both to prison. And so that's what Jesus is saying, because in reality, it doesn't have to be that way. If you owed 50 denarii and you were going to prison and somebody forgave you, you can be just as grateful as the one who owed 500. But it's so incredible how a lot of people don't see it that way. And that's the point Jesus is trying to make. For those who have ears to hear, we need to hear this one. We need to know who we are without Christ. And understand where we would be without him. No matter if we're a 50 or a 500, right? A 50 or a 500. Let's read the rest of it. Then those who were at the table began to say among themselves, "Who is this who even forgives sins?" And he said to the woman, "Your faith has saved you. Go in peace." In other words, they started grumbling, so they didn't understand. I tend to think Simon may have. I just think he was the one who was 50. But perhaps Simon is not a believer. We just don't know. But the one thing we do know is that they start grumbling because, number one, they don't see who Jesus is yet. And number two, they didn't understand why he'd come. Because Christ came to forgive sins. But they couldn't get it. In fact, I think some of them couldn't even see themselves as being a sinner with the 50, right? But anyways, he just wanted the woman. He said, listen, it's one of the most beautiful phrases in the scripture when it says here that your faith has saved you. Go in peace. Faith in Christ is what saves you. Faith doesn't save you. Grace saves you. Faith is the vehicle that gets it into your life, right? And then tells her to go in peace. Says, in other words, you don't have to worry about these debts anymore. I've paid them. It's just a powerful story, guys. It's one of the most powerful in the scriptures. But it also teaches a lesson about hypocrisy that you and I don't need to be judging, because what happens is that we can always find somebody worse than us. And somehow we think we need God's grace less because we're not as bad as some. That is to whom this story was written. Right? Got a couple of things for you to think on. I'm not going to call these things to learn. I'm going to call them questions to ask. And these are just things just to ask ourselves, right? Don't think about other people. Think about you. All right, number one, have you ever seen your debt as being as one that you couldn't pay, as unpayable, right? Therefore, you see the helpless and hopelessness of who we are in ourselves. As the scriptures would teach, bankrupt, right? Blessed are the poor in spirit. If you ever wondered why he said, blessed are the poor in spirit, that means blessed are the bankrupt in themselves, right? So when you begin to see, it's a gift when you can see it. All right, number two, have you ever seen that God sent Christ to die on a cross for that unpayable debt? So the reason Christ came was to pay that debt. And his ability to pay that debt was because of who he was. Have you put those together? Guys, that's the gospel. That's what salvation is, right? Number three, in light of this, is there any love in this life that can compare to the love that you have for God? We tend to love those, right? And when you understand who Christ is and what he came to do, I mean, that's what the scriptures teach. There will be no greater love in this life, right, than the one you have for him. Right? Number four, and finally, is there anything in this life that would take priority over your relationship with God? You know, when we come down to it, if we truly understand who we were and where we were, if we truly understand what was done for us, and if we truly have experienced a relationship with him, then how can anything really compare? So as we close this stories that Jesus told, this one is powerful because it speaks to those who perhaps don't know who Christ is. See, this is not about being religious. This is not about trying to be a good person, because the Pharisees were good at that. This is about understanding who Christ is and what he came to do. And if you are a believer today, you know that you're his. That to remember a humble heart and a humble spirit like this woman had, and a reminder to ourselves of where we would be without Christ, always will keep us in a good place. All right. God bless. God bless. And have a great rest of your weekend. But guys, I am so looking forward to seeing you this next coming week. And so God bless. Have a great week. And I look forward to see you Saturday or Sunday. All right. Saturday or Sunday, 6 o'clock Saturday, 9 and 10:45 on Sunday. All right. Y'all have a great day. God bless.